You've got the best podcast, the hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. There, lady sings, and that makes it official. Welcome to the big show. We certainly appreciate you guys being here. As always, the Chris Voss Show is the family that loves you but doesn't judge you, at least not as harsh as your mother-in-law, because, I don't know, she just never liked you anyway. She wanted her daughter to marry Bob, because Bob, went on to that illustrious career of being a real estate agent or something, and you're still, I don't know, you're developing, but, work at it. And that's why you listen to the Chris Voss Show, is you can be better to impress your mother-in-law someday, or not, one of the two. I don't know, just make it up as you go on, Chris. Anyway, guys, we got an amazing author on the show, and damn it, we always have amazing authors for 16 years, 2,000 episodes. When have we not? Like, seriously, I challenge you to go listen to every damn episode and find an author who wasn't amazing, because you're not going to find it, but listen to the episodes anyway again, because I don't know, it helps with the radio play. He's the author of the newest book to come out March 1st, 2023. Joel David Bond is on the show with us today. His book is entitled As Large as Your Spirit, a Reverse Refugee Memoir, and he'll be joining us on the show to tell us about what that experience was like and how he lived through it, and how you can too, and some of the lessons you'll learn from his journeys. Joel David Bond is dedicated to helping people navigate their cultural world with mindful intention, fostering empathy and understanding across borders, with a profound belief in the power of travel to create a more empathetic world. Joel brings a unique perspective to every journey, drawing from over 20-plus years of overseas living and cross-cultural experience, as well as a master's degree in education and a background as a global flight attendant. Welcome to the show, Joel. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me today, Chris.
Thanks for coming. It's good to have you. Give us your .coms. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
JoelDavidBond.com, my full name.
There you go. Yeah. Do you ever pick up chicks and they go, hey, what's your name? You're like, Bond. Joel David Bond.
I do make use of that as much as I possibly can.
I'd milk the shit out of that. In there, you're like, do you know James? Yeah, I'm his brother. So
007.5.
There you go, a cousin. Just work it. You should pick up a British accent too. I'd develop that if I were you. So enough of that. Give us a 30,000 overview of your new book, As Large as Your Spirit.
Well, Chris, the book is about my experience during the quarantine, during the pandemic in 2020.
When? Pandemic? There was a pandemic?
I know, right? Crazy. But the whole experience really was unique for me, because I was living in Iraq at the time. I was living out in the Middle East, and I had decided to take a 1-week vacation away from sort of the intensity of living out in Iraq, and decided to go to this Greek island in the Aegean Sea. When I landed on the island, within 24 hours of being there, the World Health Organization used the words global pandemic, and all the borders fell, the borders were closed. Wow. It was just like a crazy toppling of dominoes. And what was going to be a 1-week vacation was just my carry-on bag on the Greek island was dragged out into five long months.
Oh, wow.
So I don't speak Greek. I didn't know anybody. I was trapped and isolated alone on this island, a little bit off grid. And it was then partway through, as restrictions started to lift, that I learned that there was a refugee camp on the island. And they were filled with refugees from Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, all these places where I had lived and visited. And so partway through, I decided to volunteer at the refugee camp. So the premise of the book is a man from the West caught in Greece trying to get back to his adopted home in the Middle East, who ends up interacting with all these Middle Easterners caught in Greece trying to get to the West. And it's the intersection of our lives and the way that it really changed everyone's course for the better.
Wow. And so, well, let's get into it. I mean, this is quite interesting. I was joking with you before the show. I'm like, oh, you got stuck in Greece. Oh no, like beautiful Greece women and hot euros all the time, and great Greek food. I like the Mediterranean grill that's by us, so you can tell. Greek salads, feta cheese. I mean, oh, the horrors. Anyway,
I know, right? Don't make me relive the experience.
being by that beautiful ocean, and the Greek buildings, yeah, that's the suffrage is real. But no, I mean, you got your one carry-on bag, all your belongings are over in another country, and probably it feels incredibly alienated.
Yeah, incredibly. I mean, the entire experience, as dramatic as it sounds and as amazing as it sounds to live on this Greek island, I mean, it really was traumatic because
Yeah.
everybody, if you think back to 2020, was, locked down. You couldn't go out, you couldn't interact with people. You were wondering what the future was going to hold.
Yeah.
And I had that same experience, but all of a sudden isolated in a place that was off grid, very, very poor connection to the internet, with
Mhm.
nobody that I knew, and I didn't speak any Greek.
Wow.
And in the midst of all of this, I'm trying to figure out, can I get back home? Is it possible? Have I accidentally just moved to Greece now?
How long is this pandemic going to go for? A lot of questions we were asking there. I mean, we were kind of asking questions like, "Am I going to die here? Is this how it goes down?" Right?
Yeah. I mean, everyone, if you think back and put yourself in that space, we all had this sense of, fear and uncertainty and just really not sure what was happening. And so
Yeah.
the whole experience, while you read through the book, is obviously this great, memoir of Greek islands and the food and all the amazing scenery and the people that are there. But at the same time, it's also an internal reflection of what does it mean to find a place to call home?
Yeah.
Because I'm not able to go back to mine. And at the same time, I'm interacting with these refugees who have lost their home. And so it's this sense of what does it mean to find a geographical space, but also an interpersonal space, an intrapersonal space to call home. So
There you go. Yeah, I mean, you kind of found a little bit of your tribe there in the refugee camp of people who also had lost their home.
yeah, I really, really did. I mean, all of these people, I think one thing that really amazed me the most was how much I learned about the global migrant crisis.
Mm.
1% of the world's population has been displaced due to global conflict.
Mhm.
And that statistic has stayed, roughly around that same number for a number of years now.
Wow.
And which is a significant number of people. And 1%, that's the size of, some large nations,
Yeah.
just totally displaced. And so as I'm working with these people and volunteering and helping them learn English is what I was doing. I was teaching
Oh.
English. I'm literally giving them a voice to navigate through the complex bureaucracy of the migrant and asylum seeking system. So it was really just fascinating to be able to hear their stories and what they were going through and to learn just the history of global migration. So many of my students were doctors, lawyers, high-ranking politicians, very educated people from their home countries.
Yeah.
That really defied my expectations of what a refugee was. We think, particularly here in the States, you're sort of immersed in the news of, refugees being, maybe second-class citizens, or they do the labor jobs, or they, come across, and, you have these, and some of that is true. But I think what I really learned through actually talking and speaking with these refugees was how educated and intelligent a lot of them were, and they couldn't, for whatever reason, practice their business or their industry, their art back in home, and were forced to go someplace else. And then without the language skill, couldn't integrate into the societies they were moving to.
Yeah. Even more sadly, they're painted as sometimes criminals a lot of times. And you see politicians that will take and do that and be like, they're sending us their worst. They're criminals, and a lot of these people from Syria, I think Syria probably was a large part of that group, maybe.
Yeah.
A lot of these folks from Syria, yeah, they were doctors and held good jobs. They had beautiful houses. They had, they were a lot like us. I mean, I think, the story of what you're telling people is, they're a lot like us, where they were living their lives. They had, they had the car and the garage and the house and the kids and the backyard and the career, and then war came and turned their lives upside down. And frankly, when you think about it, I mean, it can kind of happen to just about any of us, really. I mean, no one's really immune from that.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of my whole mission, Chris, is to help people see that these people who you think are other, who are different, who are across the boundary line, sociopolitically, economically, religiously, whatever it might be, are actually not that different from you and I.
Yeah.
And that if you're willing to step back and take a look at the fundamental values that are being shared, I mean, I tell people all the time, I've spent 7 years living and working in Iraq, which people say, whoa, like, what are you doing in a place like that? And I'm like, I'm the same thing anybody else is doing anywhere else in the world, taking the kids to school and seeing grandma and picking up milk from the supermarket, the things that everybody does, everybody's doing in these places that are, libeled with the news and the headlines. So I tell people, if I were to choose where I was going to live in the world based solely on the news headlines, by the same logic, I would never want to move to America because of gun violence and protests and political upheaval, because the news always gives you the 1% of terror, right?
Yeah,
the
that's
1%
true.
of bad, if it leads, it bleeds, right?
Yeah.
And while that 1% is true, that's a real thing, those things that happen on the news, it is only a small percentage of reality. And 99% of daily life is you and I just doing our thing, making it day by day.
Yeah. In fact, I was having Canada as my backup to move to, when I get old with that healthcare system. But then there was that whole trucker thing, and then evidently their real estate prices are going through the roof right now. So I guess it's Mexico at this point for me. It's backup. But no, you're right. If it bleeds, it leads, the 1%, and the news, and you think, oh my God, it's horrible everywhere. But yeah, these are the interesting thing about that experience that you went through that's cathartic is, during COVID, we all kind of got scraped away that veneer of us to where, I was living my life, worried about buying things and being successful and spending money and getting money and building companies and everything. And I remember, losing extraordinary amounts of money that we'd planned for events for the year. I mean, we used to do a lot of events like CES and NAB show and South by Southwest and I mean, just incredible amounts of money for these events that I do. And it just gone, and it was guaranteed money. It was like, every year we'd built this business, and so that was stripped away. And then you're like, what do we do next? And it kind of turned us all into immigrants a little bit when it came down to it. Maybe not. I might be pushing it on my analogy there, but it kind of stripped away all of that sort of thing. And I remember thinking, Jesus Christ, I could, number one, my life could die. We don't know how bad this is because no one really knew, and there were morgues being filled. And then on top of that, you're like, well, who gives a fuck about the car and the house and all this other bullshit I'm always working on? I've got my mom and my sister that I love very much, and they could be taken from me. They were both not in the best of health and age. And then it just really came down to, like, I don't give a fuck about any of this stuff. What's the most important thing to me? Oh, my family. And it made me arrive at that moment with COVID. And I imagine a lot of, that's almost kind of the experience of a refugee. A lot of your stuff gets torn away from you. It doesn't matter anymore. Your identity.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you're terribly off with the analogy. I mean, that's part of what I address in the book is the concept of how I'm living this life on this Greek island, away from home, not able to return, having lost my community. And while I come from a place of privilege, I was there on vacation, basically, I had the means and I wasn't forced out of a home. As I began to go into the refugee camp and to volunteer in the community there, I began to identify those shared values of what does it mean? What does it feel like to have lost everything, even temporarily? What does it feel like to not know where your next meal is going to come from, where you're headed to, if you have a place to sleep at night, and just trying to figure out and navigate all of those bits and pieces. Yeah. And I think it really made me much more empathetic towards the refugee crisis and towards my students in just their plight, because I'm experiencing similar emotions
Yeah.
albeit a different circumstance at a different level, a different space, coming at it from a different angle.
Yeah.
But the emotions that underlie all of that were so much the same. And so when I would have students come in and, tell me that they, were tired of living in the refugee camp, that they were, just wishing that they could move on to the next thing, that they were missing their friends and their family back home. Well, those are all emotions that I had as well. I'm tired of living on this Greek island. I'm tired of not being able to go home. I miss my friends and my family, and I'm wondering what I'm going to do next. And so once I was able to make those sorts of connections, it really made for strong relationships with several of those students I'm still friends with and connected with on social media today.
Wow. One of the things that happened to me when I went through my crisis, and I've talked about this before on the show, we'd done this podcast for, I think it was about 10 years at that point, or 14 maybe, 12, something like that. And it had run itself out. I was tired of talking about Google and iPhones and technology in Silicon Valley. And, we had great CEOs on the show, but it did kind of run itself out. Social media kind of run the course of its thing. And it just seemed what we were talking about didn't mean a hill amount of beans when COVID hit. It just seemed like, well, this is fucking just stupid. Like, who gives a shit about an iPhone when you're going to die tomorrow or your family's going to die tomorrow? Yeah. And then, we lost probably the same thing. A lot of, not wholesale, because, I know refugee camps, they can't leave, but we lost a lot of our freedoms too. It was kind of, like, you got to stay in your home, and you're like, oh shit. I remember how nice it was to finally go out and eat someplace where at least when I feel safe. But I remember I was kind of starting to really fall into depression, because I'm like, fuck, 2008 all over again. I've seen this movie. And one of my friends posted on Facebook, and he says, here's what you do right now. You do two things, or one of two things. Be a lifter or find a lifter. And that's what you do right now. This is what you do in this moment. And so I think it's interesting what you did is, you had the experience of being in a moment of loss and transition, I guess, but you didn't know how long that transition was going to take place. And you decided to be a lifter in that moment.
Yeah. I think overall the full experience, I needed something to do with my time that felt productive, that felt like I was doing something meaningful. And like you said, COVID hits, and all of a sudden you're like, well, who really gives a rat's ass about the latest model of, technology that's coming out? Or, all of a sudden you sort of, the veneer stripped away, and you began to realize, all of us, what really was valuable and what was just fluff.
Yeah.
And as the volume got turned down on the external noise of the world, and the volume got turned up on your own internal world, I think we all began to dial in a little bit more closer to the sorts of things that were meaningful and important to us. Yeah. And for me, that was being able to connect with others, help others, to provide some service with the skills that I had through education, and also to connect with these people who were from a part of the world that I loved. And that was my adopted home, and I'm here, and they miss that place. I miss the same place. And if there's, Iraqi refugees in this camp, I can talk about Baghdad with them.
Yeah,
like I can even share a few, informal greetings and casual conversation in their native language. And, while they have people who are fluent, in their own language that are living with them, sometimes it's just nice to have an extra person come along who has a different perspective. And the whole experience, as I just can't explain enough how much it really altered my own perspective and enabled me to grow. And the title of the book itself, As Large as Your Spirit, really stems from that idea of being in the situation really allowed my spirit to expand.
Wow.
To fill a space larger than I thought I could. It's this very expansive moment, this expansive experience.
Isn't it interesting how good it is for us when we go from whatever it is we're doing to moments of gratitude, or a gratitude sort of stage where, and then we give back in those moments. Isn't it interesting how that can change us and make us better and improve the quality of our life?
I remember when I first decided that I was going to go and volunteer at the refugee camp. It was about 2 months into the whole ordeal on the island as local restrictions started to lift, and I would take the bus across the island It's about an hour-long bus journey across through the mountains to the other side of this island. And I remember thinking, why am I doing this? Like, this is costing me money. This is costing me time. I have no income right now because everything's been put on pause.
Mhm.
And yet I had this just compulsion. It was this drive to go and do this because, well, one, what else was I going to do?
Sure.
But also it was so gratifying in so many ways to connect with people, and to, especially after so long of not being connected, and to be able to give back and to also receive from the community that I was working with,
Oh.
and to just learn so much about the crisis, about their stories, about why they had left their country and why they were looking for a better life someplace else, and what their motivations were and their whole journey to get to the island.
Mhm.
I mean, some of the stories were just incredible, and I couldn't actually give voice to all of them in the book, but
Mhm.
the people who would pay, $7, $8, $10,000 to a
Jeez.
people smuggler
Mhm.
to shove them in a little rubber dinghy to go a mile across the water to these Greek islands, and they get lost and float around in the Aegean Sea for days.
Wow.
Some of my people that I worked with had been stuck in the refugee asylum seeking process for upwards of 7 years.
Holy crap.
Made my 5 months look like a blip on the map. I mean,
Yeah, it gave you perspective, usually, in that case of gratitude, huh?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember one particular instance. I had 2 young boys who were from Syria.
Mhm.
They were about 18 years old, I think, and they'd been sort of stuck in the system for a couple of years at this point, and had traveled through Turkey, hitchhiked across Turkey, basically, paid their money to these people smugglers, got across on the boat to the island, and then ended up in this refugee asylum seeking camp, which was, I mean, the conditions, Chris, I can't even begin to tell you. I mean, it's just abysmal, just the conditions that these people live in this camp.
Mhm.
And it was so bad that I remember these 2 boys, they missed class one day, and I asked the coordinator for the volunteer center, like, where these kids were, and she informed me that they'd been picked up by the Coast Guard because they'd been caught trying to swim back to Turkey
Oh, wow.
because conditions were so bad in the camp, and it was so unhygienic, it was so just unhospitable, like so many things about that space weren't good, that they thought, well, it is better to sleep anywhere back in a war-torn zone, hitchhike back to Syria, or to sleep at the bottom of the sea if we don't.
Yeah, or to die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was better for them to do that than to stay in the refugee camp. And
Wow.
thankfully, the Coast Guard had picked them up and brought them back in, and
Mhm.
they received help and assistance that they needed. Now, they're both resettled into Europe and have new lives and are doing well and prospering in Germany and Austria, I believe. And but it was amazing to me to just hear these stories
Yeah.
of these people and all they went through to go for this better life. And here I am living this kind of, luxurious lifestyle in this resort villa. But in the same instance, as I hear about these 2 boys trying to go back to Syria, I actually lost my house in
Oh,
Iraq,
wow.
and it was sold out from underneath me, and everything had to be moved out of my house in my absence.
Oh, jeez.
And so I had to coordinate via FaceTime with a group of friends to, like, pack up everything and put it in boxes and move it out. And so here I am, sort of having the same emotional experience of
Losing your home.
losing everything. And so what good is it to do anything?
Yeah.
And so, the book takes you through all that process and that cycle of what it means to really find that space to call home, not just geographically, but in your own heart, in your own head, and mirrors that same journey with those refugees.
There you go. Yeah, I look at the refugees that come, like, to America and stuff, and the mindset of what these people believe in the dream of America. They almost believe in the dream of America more than people that are born here in America.
Yeah.
And when people come here, that's why you see some immigrants do really better than the people who come here, is because they understand the American dream, and they're like, I'm working hard and doing the thing. Meanwhile, the rest of us are just sitting around eating Cheetos and watching TV, scratching our belly buttons, and America. Anyway, enough of that. But these are people who put their life on the line. They put their personal health, their safety, There's people that are attacked, sexual assault. There's all sorts of things that happen to them as they do these things, and they have children too. I mean, you have to realize, kind of what you talked about, where, wherever they're at is so awful that taking this risk is worth it to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to have some compassion for those people to realize that's the situation they're in. They're not a bunch of people who are just like, hey, let's go on a fucking joyride from Chile to fucking America and walk half the way, because that just sounds like fun,
Yeah.
Like, let's go streaking on Sunday night and just end up in America, It's not something they were just like, hey, this seems like something that would be nice to do. It's like, no, they're running from the hell, the horrors, and everything else that go on. But I love the fact that you found, humanity, gratitude, giving back. During that time, I was really getting depressed and lost, because it was just like hundreds of thousands of dollars just evaporating, show after show after show after show.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like watching money burn. And then, the conversations of like, well, how long are we doing this for? Maybe 2 or 3 years. Okay. All right. And it was just awful. And so I sat down with myself, and maybe you'd done this a little bit, but I sat down with myself and I said, what are my assets? What do I have that I can give? And like my friend said, this is a moment where you either find a lifter or be a lifter.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not a good lift. I'm not a good follower. I'm a leader type. That's just kind of how I am. I like to be the guy who sits around and cries in his beer all day, but it's just not me. And so I said, what are my assets? Well, I have this great podcast, this great audience we built over 10, 12 years. And I go, how can we give back? How can we serve the community? Because everyone's in a dark place right now. I remember going through 2008. I remember how lonely that is. What can I do to serve the community? And I've got this soapbox. And so I said, you know what? Fuck it. We're not going to talk about Silicon Valley and all that bullshit anymore. We're going to have authors on. We're going to talk about books. We're going to talk about education. We're going to talk about inspiring how to change the world, how to fix the world. I remember my episodes back then. I was trying to talk people through how I got through 2008, how you could be an entrepreneur, how you could maybe figure out how to do things. And I was coming up with ideas that people could try and do that I was seeing people do. Like, there was some people really inventive as entrepreneurs, and they decided to be grocery delivering people. So they were helping old people that couldn't get out, or that didn't want to get out because of the risk to them, and helping them go do groceries and stuff like that. And so that's what it became. And we opened up the scope to where we started having all these great book authors like yourself on the show to talk about anything and everything. So, we've got romance novels, the politics, and everything, but all sorts of stories and cathartic moments and things you can learn about people. And for the first time in all the companies I owned and everything I've invested, everything I've ever done in life, I found a business that I love. Mm. And the passion that I love in doing the podcast. I fell in love with something for the very first time in 50 years of my stupid life of owning companies, dozens of companies. People would be like, hey, it's good that you do what you love. I'm like, I don't love any of this on the side that makes money, and I'm the CEO. And so being able to talk about things that have an impact on life, that can change people's worlds, to me, that just has become the biggest boner in the world of doing all this. And yet, kind of when you think about it, you may be in the same place and feeling where you're at in life and what you're doing now. It's kind of like we had to hit that bottom to find ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, I think you end up being able to provide your biggest strengths born out of your own broken weakness.
That's well said.
And
you should put that on a shirt.
I should put some coasters out there or whatever, a couple bumper stickers,
There you go.
Cheesy wall art from Hobby Lobby, whatever it is.
Etsy.
But yeah, I mean, I really do believe that. Like, once you're broken open, once you've reached that moment of broken weakness, mm-hmm. It's from that you're able to rebuild and give back to the world some of your greatest strengths. Broken bones heal back stronger, than they were before. And I think the same thing goes for our own mental capacity and our own emotional capacities. Mm-hmm. Is that when you find yourself really broken internally.
Yeah.
It's from that space as you learn, and I mean, you obviously have to go through a healing process. Like, it doesn't just happen automatically, but as you work through that healing process, you then can turn around and give back to people who are in, earlier iterations of yourself, basically, and help them move along that same journey.
Yeah. I mean, we lost all of our revenue streams pretty much for the most part. I mean, we still had some of our smaller revenue streams, but we lost our big money. And I remember just sitting there on the podcast going, well, fuck it. I don't know how this is going to all turn out, but we're going to do a podcast today, and we're going to try and make people smile. We're going to try and make people laugh. And even though I want to go cry half the time, and I mean, you listen to a few shows, and I'm cracking. I can't hold it together. I'm trying to give people ideas. I'm trying to give people things that they can lift, and I'm trying to be a lifter, and I'm cracking while I'm doing it. Yeah. And I think there was some times where I was ready to break, and I was like, just keep lifting, try to be a lifter, be a giver, try and serve. And I think too, your story is an example of what we need to do more often. I created something called Gratitude Sundays from COVID, where I spend a lot of Saturdays focused on my family, my 2 dogs, me. I focus on the gratitude that I have for life. Yeah. It just seems like when we give back, when we try and be in that spirit of giving, it just opens up a better part of us.
Yeah. I think, you've really touched on something there. The owner of the villa where I was trapped in Greece, when I first arrived, it was very Bates Motel. They weren't open for the season yet. And it felt like I was walking into like this horror film, like barren skeletal trees with like skittering brown leaves across the pavement with the paint flaking off the buildings. It was just like they hadn't renovated yet for the summer season, because I arrived in early March.
One of those places where you don't go in the shower, basically.
Yeah, right. But the owner of the whole site was actually really really warm and welcoming. And early on, I mean, I was the only guest for 4 out of the 5 months that I was stuck there. Mm-hmm. And so he was super generous, and he said, I can't charge you full price. This is act of God. Like, wow. I know you didn't intend to stay here for this long, so just pay me monthly rent. Here's the keys to the laundry. Take care of yourself. Just don't give me COVID. And but I remember he had this little mountain hut on the interior of the island, that his own little market garden that he would go, and it was his escape from the rigors of running a resort on the beach side there. And I remember he took me up there one afternoon, and we spent an afternoon just digging around in the dirt, just getting our fingers in the mud and pulling up weeds and tending to the carrots and the onions and the parsley and everything, just in this beautiful little tiny mountain hut, like 10 foot by 10 foot footprint, in this little building. And I remember being in that space, and he was very much into Zen meditation and mindfulness practices. And he didn't say much that entire day, but the few words of wisdom that he did give me really just kind of opened me up and made me realize how grateful I was for the whole experience, and how it would be easy to be bitter and angry and frustrated and sad and confused about the whole situation. But at the same time, I'm in a space that's beautiful, and I have people who I have never known before in my life volunteer to take care of me and take me under their wing and make sure that I was safe and accommodate for me in this time, in this space when I was, a complete stranger, an utter stranger to them. And yet to just sit down in the dirt and pluck the weeds. And I remember sort of thinking it was like plucking the weeds in my own heart. Like, let's just pull this crap out, and let's just focus on what's good.
There you go.
And cultivate that.
And he was helping you out as well, and you were paying it forward and giving it back. And it's kind of interesting. I almost wonder if we need more of that in this world, because that used to be the way we lived as a community. I mean, if there was a traveler who came through, you would break bread with that traveler. I believe that's where the term breaking bread comes from. And you would welcome them in your home, and they would tell you their stories, their journeys, and then you would feed them and house them. And, that used to be part of our community. We lived in such a way where we were dependent on each other for survival a lot of times. And in this case, I mean, what a great, beautiful story in learning that, but also a great example for maybe how we need to think about living our lives. More gratitude, more charity, more giving back, more empathy for our fellow human beings. I mean, it still kills me when you understand how well America integrates immigrants better than any country in the world because they love the American dream.
Mm.
And it kills me how we don't get it here in America because we're so spoiled. And these people who come, they have this, they believe in the American dream more than we do, and the vision of what it is. And so when they come here, they just want to be stupid Americans, which I don't know why anybody would at this point, but anyway, I'm just kidding. But they believe in that dream that they're willing to risk their life for it. And then we're like assholes to them, going, well, how dare you try and come here? Well, what the hell? What was that? What was the Statue of Liberty out there for? What's that all about?
I know, right? This is the whole. I mean, America was founded on all of those ideals and those concepts, and yet today, I mentioned earlier, 1% of the world's population is displaced due to conflict. Yeah. The U.S. officially invites in less than 1% of that 1%.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
That's an interesting figure. Yeah, and sadly, the politicians that you're out there, they're making it sound like, I don't know, there's just turnstiles running down there, and everyone's getting in, and everyone's a criminal, and it's just sad. And you have to understand the reason they're doing it is because they see those people as potential voters, and they know they can't win with the setup they have now for their thing, and they're just worried about that. And that's really not the reason to throw people away. And some of our greatest people in this country, and the thing that made this country great was immigrants. I mean, us being able to pull people from all over the world, Oppenheimer and Einstein and some of the people we pulled out of Germany, Nazi Germany, that helped us build the bomb that made us a superpower by having that giant stick. There's so many just innovations that came to America, and now we're in a situation where we need more of that. We need more ideas. We need more brighter people. You look at the head of Google, the CEO of Google. He grew up on a dirt floor in India. Steve Jobs was the son of an immigrant from Syria.
I mean, unless you are Native American, you are of immigrant stock in this country. My great-grandparents immigrated from Germany and Norway. This is Scotland. So... who are we to turn around and be like, oh, these people aren't welcome here? It's because they're not the right kind of immigrant. What is that supposed to mean? If we're all going to be connecting with each other across cultural, religious, sociopolitical lines, nobody's the wrong kind of immigrant unless you truly are a criminal, in which case those vetting processes are in place, right?
Yeah, they are. And that's the other thing, too. The politicians make it seem like there's no vetting process in place.
No, there's rigorous vetting process in place.
Most Americans can't even pass the citizenship test.
Right.
They make when they become a citizen. Most Americans have no idea how to pass that test. And these people love us. They love our country. And, we got a lot of people running around that don't love this country and don't really give a shit about democracy and the Constitution. So there's that. I mean, let's ship the January 6 people off to Mexico and we'll trade. I'm all for that.
Do an even exchange here.
I'm all for that. They don't like our country anyway. Go back to where anyway. But the interesting thing about it, we had somebody on the show one time who told me what that term is when, like, Mexicans or people come here from other countries and then they don't want anybody to let them in. They call it the close the door behind them policy. And it's a policy that's built out of scarcity. And even when Americans do it, it's a policy built out of scarcity. And the great thing about this country that made it great was this mindset of abundance, that a rising tide lifts all boats. That, you can be from Ireland and Mexico and you can be a Jew, you can be whatever you are. We can all work together and we can build America and rise all the boats together, wherever you're from, and whatever your religion is, whatever your background is, et cetera, et cetera. And now we live in this scarcity thing where, we're fighting over everything and anything, and we're not realizing that that's just a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it. So let's get into some other things that you do, because I know you do some speaking and some other things on your website. Tell us about what you're doing there.
Yeah, so I'm currently actually writing my second book, which is about actually an overview of my 7 years of life in Iraq. And then I do some public speaking around the Kansas City area at the moment where I'm based, going around to various organizations, talking about cross-cultural awareness and empathy and helping people understand what it means to just connect with people who might be different from you. And then I've also done some travel in the past, so done some tour guiding and travel itinerary arrangements for people to help them actually immerse themselves in cultures where they wanted to go. And so I've taken people on tours through Iraq and Turkey and Poland, Germany, Denmark, Norway, UK, France, so Morocco, taking people all over the world and basically help them integrate across culturally and connect with people, share meals with families that are local there and understand what it means to connect across cultures. So that's the majority of what I've been doing. And then I also work in education. So when I'm not sort of based in one location here in the States, I tend to be living abroad overseas someplace, working in international private education.
There you go. You are the great bridger of getting us to understand each other on a national scale. I mean, some of those places sound highly and extremely dangerous, like France. Have you ever seen what the farmers are up to over there when they throw a fit? They're like spraying feces on every government building. It's pretty.
I mean, the mold and the cheese alone is enough to kill you. So
that's true. That's true. If you eat enough of it, I'm wearing half of it right now. I've tried to jump off a cliff eating their cheese, but it's good. And their coffee is good too. But no, it's great that you're bridging these gaps. So, who usually works with you? Is it individual people? Is it corporate sponsors putting on these associations? How does what sort of client base are you looking for out there?
Mostly individuals. So small groups and individuals for touring and traveling. And then for my presentations, it can be, I've done a lot of church groups, NGO groups, community gatherings, interfaith dialogue groups I've done. So anything that's an organization, Rotary clubs, that kind of thing. Have done a lot of that public speaking just to get the message out to the community on what it takes to connect.
There you go. You sound like Anthony Bourdain 2.0. I like
Excellent. I like that. I'll take it.
There you go. I used to love watching Anthony Bourdain, and somebody explained to me years ago the breaking of the bread and the importance of yeast and having leavened bread and being able to share that with a stranger, and how we used to get to know people over dining.
Yeah.
And so when you would watch Anthony Bourdain, go to different cultures and places and find this human bond between each other, I really enjoy that. I do that now with meetup groups that I have for like singles and stuff. We have like luncheons and dinners and meetups. And, part of my podcast is there's 2 to 3 people a day I meet on here and make friends with, like yourself, that just wisen me and expand my mind. And I love it. And although maybe we should break bread on the show, maybe we should all eat while we're doing the show.
I know, right?
That might be a good idea. We could change the format a little bit. But
you just found yourself a new little trick for the show.
You're having spaghetti over there while I'm having spaghetti, and we're just I don't know. It might be make for a weird show because there'll be a plate clanking and like.
What's that popular Korean trend where you watch other people eat their noodles?
Mung bong or bang or something like that. Yeah. I think we have a whole new YouTube thing going on here. Here we go. We're all just getting fat watching the show. And people are talking with their mouth full. Anyway, yeah, maybe we do have an ASMR show going on. I don't know, whatever, mukbang. But it's learning the importance of sitting down together in a human setting of having empathy and seeing that we're human beings is so important. This world that we live in now is so disconnected from 2D screens and, watching each other through social media. We have no idea who each other is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, we are social beings. Even the most, introverted person still needs a connection. We still long for being, connected to other people on some level. And in our age of social media, we've become so disconnected. And so for me, it's been this great opportunity in my travel to be able to not just pop in and out and do these city trips, but to actually go and live these places, to spend, immerse myself in the culture and connect with the people and actually make lifelong friends.
Wow.
And so for me, that's my perspective is it's the art of slow travel, basically the art of slow relationship building, community building over time.
Yeah. There you go. Well, this has been fun and wonderful to have you, Joel, and open our eyes to, sometimes in the darkest moments of your life, the best time is to give back, but don't wait until then either. Give back now. Try and figure out a way that you can improve the world. We all can be leaders in that.
Yeah, I agree, 100%.
There you go. So give people your .coms as we go out so people can find you on the interwebs.
Yeah, website, joeldavidbond.com, and I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at joeldavidbond. And my book, As Large as Your Spirit, is available on Amazon.
There you go. Let's get you a deal like Anthony Bourdain had. We need a replacement for that. We need somebody to show us the international things and understanding. I learned so much about, other countries and other worlds, especially the food part.
Oh, yeah.
I love
Sign me up. I offer myself as tribute for the next one.
Well, they're going to have to pay you, damn it. So, you're going to get food poisoning in some of those places, so, you got to...
Already.
Evidently, a lot of those you've gotten a lot of those food guys, they get food poisoning in different places. But me, I just go to McDonald's for the food poisoning, so you can get that local too. So thank you for coming on. As Large as Your Spirit, a reverse refugee memoir, came out March 1st, 2023. Great book. You should pick it up and be reminded of what's important in life. I think one of the things that really bugged me was we all kind of became human and got along with each other and kind of shored each other up during COVID. But like somewhere near the end of COVID, we're all just like, okay, fuck everybody. Let's go back to making money and slinging shit and selling shit and fuck everybody. And it was like, I was like, wow, we just lost that. Probably a beautiful moment to take and be better people, and we just went back to being the shittiest people in the world.
I know. We had this redemptive moment, so close.
I know, so close. It's like maybe we should bring that back again, but not. But yeah, it's one thing man can learn from his history is man never learns from his history.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for my audience for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, YouTube.com/Chris Voss. Chris Voss one on TikTok, all those crazy places on the internet. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other for damn ass sakes. And we'll see you next time.